I will send out the join information. My participants will join me. If I use registration, I'm adding in a step in between. So I am going to make my participants, my future participants, come to this registration page, have them register while they're answering a few questions for me. And this can be one of the benefits of registrations. First of all, I can collect information. Secondly, I do have somewhat of an idea how many participants can I possibly expect for my webinar. So if I use registration for a recurring meeting, then of course, I'm going to say, do they register once and they can come to any of these occurrences? Do they need to register for each of these dates? Or do they register once and they freely get to choose to join one or more sessions? If it's not a recurring webinar, then of course, I'm not going to have to determine that. Then there's only this one webinar that they can register for. All right, then further down, webinar passcode. Yes, same as for meetings, I would always set a passcode also for your webinars. This means your participants will have to type in that passcode before they get to join your webinar. Video and audio gets pulled from the default settings. And remember, video, only your panelists are able to be on webcam. Attendees are not able to turn on their webcam. Always
Remember,
compare that a little bit to your experience today, right? This is why I personally think it's great that you're joining as attendees today. And then those few options that I can set. So Q&A, I spoke a little bit about that earlier. I do get to show you the Q&A here in the second part. I think it's a great tool. I love to use it on webinars because it allows for your attendees to submit questions. Enable the practice session. You can, of course, not use practice sessions, however, as a best practice. Use practice sessions. This allows you to schedule this webinar and use the session for practicing. So you will not have to schedule a second webinar for you to get on with your panelists and speakers and do practice to practice there. You can use the same webinar that you have set up for your live event and keep that in practice mode and get on with your panelists. Long time before your attendees can join you, you can practice your presentations, talk about timing and all that. And you can actually start that practice session as many times as you like, anytime before your actual event date. All right, and then I can also record the webinar automatically. One thing to note here is that if I turn on automatic recording, the recording will start once I move out of practice session into the live mode. The practice session is not recorded if I automatically record the session. If you would like to record the practice session, then just please start that recording manually. Alternative host right here is a nice feature. This allows me to give any of my colleagues, I'm going to use my colleague Matt here, give any of my colleagues on the same account, I can give them permission or send them a link as an alternative host. So in this case, Matt would receive a start link for my webinar, and he could be the alternative host. Example for that is if I already know that I will not be able to host this webinar, but it needs to be scheduled, then I can give the full host controls to Matt. So Matt would be able to start and entirely conduct that webinar for me. Matt, in that case, does not need to have a webinar license. He will use my webinar license, which also means at the same time that I cannot host a second webinar at the same time. All right, and then use that raise hand tool again. Live interpretation or simultaneous translating. Is that something that you would use in your webinars? I suppose yes, because this is also always a very international session, and typically a lot of you, yeah, just go ahead, raise your hand if you are planning on hiring live interpreters that will translate from one language to another in your webinars. Great, lots of hands going up. Nice. Thank you. So I'm going to show you how to set that up here. Live interpretation feature is where you can assign translators. So let's just say my colleague Matt. He's fluent in 2 languages, for instance, and he could translate the English content of the webinar into German. then I can assign him right here as an interpreter. I can also assign anybody else from another company. So maybe there is a company where I hire live interpreters, then I will add them right here. And maybe that second translator will translate then into Spanish. Let's say that second translator is going to translate into Spanish. So what I can do right here is I can create different audio channels, assign interpreters, and then from within my webinar, I can start the interpretation feature. These translators will then join their audio channel, start their translations, and that's when my attendees can choose if they want to listen to the German channel or to the Spanish channel and hear these translations. So this is also a great features. All right, and then I'm going to hit the save button. And I got to show you more about that interpretation, how to enable that in the second part. So right now, we're just setting everything up. And in the second part, I will show you how to enable all that in the webinar and how to use it in the webinar. Good. So now we've scheduled the webinar, right? I can see all my occurrences right here. Similar as for Zoom meetings, I have an option to edit all of those. I can quickly add more sessions. And this is really the benefit if I use a recurring webinar, I can have multiple sessions of the same webinar and manage all of them under one umbrella. Good. So now we're using registration and have that recurring webinar. So let's just see how we can customize this a little bit. The registration form, as I mentioned, has some questions in there. So let's see how we can actually set up those questions. Down here under options, I'm going to click on edit. And then first I will say the approval for my registrants. Will this happen automatically so everybody gets approved once they register? Or would I like to manually and hand select participants that I want to approve? I can turn on notification. This sends me an email every time somebody registers. Under other options, I could, for instance, restrict the number of participants. So maybe I have the webinar 500 license. However, I want to keep the webinar at a certain size. I can absolutely do that. And I can allow attendees to join from multiple devices. So what that means is participants will come and register for my webinar. After they register, they will receive the join link for the webinar. Now, by saying or by activating the field, I will allow attendees to join from multiple devices. I am basically saying I'm absolutely okay if one person registers. This person may share their join link with other colleagues, and then maybe 3 or 4 people can join with the same link. If I don't want this, then I need to disable that. And I'm just looking in today's attendee list. And so Anthony, for instance, has been sharing his link right there. And CAC, not sure what kind of name that is, but I see another participant, CAC, joined in from 2 devices. So that will show as multiple entries in your participant list. So you'll see the same name appear a lot of times, or Laura, for instance, is logged in twice today. So probably, and Mitch, right? So Mitch, Laura, and others that I mentioned, they probably shared their link with colleagues, and all of them are using the same link. All right, so show social share buttons on the registration page. This is these buttons up here. And these allow your registrants to share that information with others on their social media. If your goal is to get as many participants as possible, this is a nice option. Now, let's have a look at those questions. Zoom has prepared a list of standard fields for your registration form. In the first column, just activate those fields that you want to show on the registration page. In the second field, make them mandatory, which means the registration cannot be completed without an entry in that field. If you are looking to collect information that's not reflected right here, you can always add your own custom questions. So just add new questions in here, make them short, single, or multiple answer. Bring out those questions, create them. Don't forget to hit the save button, and then add any information that you would like to collect down here at the bottom. Minimum information that Zoom will always ask for is first name, last name, and email address. On top of that, it's absolutely your choice what type of information you would like to collect. Talk about branding for the registration page. You can see that up here we have a banner. This blue Zoom right here, this is what we call a banner, and we have a logo in here, and we're also able to adjust the title. Also, a nice feature, I can have as many speakers on my webinar as I want. However, I can select 3 of them, and that number is limited to 3. I can select 3 speakers right here and show them directly on the registration page. So maybe to do a little more advertising, do a little heavier advertisement. So I can show my speakers, maybe in my case right here, Professor Dumbledore with that information. Let me show you how to set that up. So I'm going to come to the branding page for my webinar. And then first of all, maybe change the title. By default, that will say webinar registration. You do have that edit button over to the right, or you can then just change that title. I've made that a little nicer. And then upload the banner, upload the logo. Those technical specifications are mentioned in here. Stick within these requirements. And then let's talk about the speakers. Speakers right here for my webinar, as I mentioned, I can show 3 of them on the registration form. So in my case right here, Professor Dumbledore, I would be able to upload a photo, which of course, for copyright reasons, I did not upload any photo right here. So give the name, the title, organization, also 1,000 characters you have available for any kind of bio or description that you'd like to add, and then save this, and you'll be able to show 3 of your speakers on the registration form. All right. So this is the entire process of setting up the registration. Now, participants can come and register and select their time zone. So I also want to demo this. So if somebody registers now for the webinar, they can switch the time zone. My time zone is Amsterdam, Berlin, because I'm joining you from Germany today. However, your participant may be joining you from Dubai, for instance. Now that's a different time zone. So they can switch all those times. Watch what happens to the times here in the background. They can switch to their local time zone. See, now time is showing in their local time zone. They can make a selection, which session they want to register for, and then they can come here and register. So if that is Maria, um, Maria Smith, haha, Smith right here, then I can register her maybe from Zoom. So my registrants will fill in those questions for me. Maybe she's a trainer. How did you hear about the webinar? Maybe from friends. Would you like to receive a recording? Yes. And this does not automatically send the recording, just for confirmation. This does not automatically send the recording. This can be any question that we put out here. Do you have questions for the webinar? Maybe not at this time. And then Maria can go ahead and register. Now, since we put this to manual approval, it's now pending approval. So Maria is not getting her join link just yet. For her to receive the link, the host of the session, so you in that case, or me right now, I need to come in here to the webinar and then come down here to my attendees. And then I can see that I have 6 registrants. Only 4 of them are approved yet. So I will then see Maria has now registered. I can deny her, give her a short message why I would not want her to participate, or I can approve her. And the moment I approve her, this is when Maria now will receive the confirmation email with the join details that go out for her to be able to join the webinar. Under approved, I always have an option right here to cancel registrations or resend the confirmation email. I can totally manage this from here. All right. So let's talk about inviting real quick. The two different groups that we have, attendees and panelists. They receive different links. Panelists will have a very specific personal link with extended rights. Attendees get their normal join link. So first of all, let's talk about the panelists. Anybody that plays an active role on my webinar, that is conducting to my webinar, I will have to invite as a panelist, so they can join me as a panelist. Interpreters right here or alternative hosts will be added automatically. However, if I have other colleagues that are helping with the Q&A, or maybe my technical support right here, or maybe my speakers, so everybody that needs to be a panelist on the webinar, I want to send them a panelist link. So I'm going to add them right here with their name and email address. And then for my attendees, how do I invite them? Typically through email. So I can just copy an invitation right here. Zoom is bringing in that registration link for my webinar. And this is the registration link right here. Right, so I can manually copy that and put that anywhere where I need this registration link to appear, maybe on my website. But if I want to send that out through email, I do have that invitation available. So I can just copy that from here. And this will tell participants after they register, they will receive a confirmation email with the join details, and then they can come to my registration page and register. We also have a nice feature, source tracking URL. And this is just really real quick. If you are publishing or advertising for your webinar on different social media types, maybe LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, or maybe in your blog or other options, you can create that, or you can create a different link. This one right here is your registration link, is the main registration link. However, you can create more links leading to the same registration page, but these links would have a tracking to them. So I can just quickly add another link, let's say for my email campaign. I have another link now, and I can use this link in my emails that I maybe send out. Maybe I have that email campaign, and these source tracking URLs allow me to track how many visitors did I have coming through these different links and how many registrations were resulting from these. All right, and this concludes the setup really for the webinar in regards to I'm ready to host the webinar. It's scheduled. I can have participants come and register now. And let's just talk about some additional features like polling, Q&A, and some other integration and live streaming. So in my webinar, those interaction tools, the polls, maybe I do plan on using polls. So I'll come to the portal right here. I'll just add polls. I can add 25 polls. I'm just going to say edit right here. I can add 25 polls per 10 questions each. So 250 questions I can use in my webinar. And this is really the same feature as in Zoom meetings. So I'm not going to talk about that in very much detail. 250 questions. I can bring those out to my attendees. They can vote on that. I also have a report available to see exactly how participants voted on those polls. And then another setting right here is for the Q&A. We also get to see that in the second part now. Q&A is the tool that allows my attendees to raise questions. Integration is which allows me to integrate Zoom with any other application or with a lot of other applications that I could be using. So let's just say I have a customer relation management tool, or maybe I do want to monetize my webinar. Then I can come to marketplace.zoom.us. This is where you find our native integrations. And then either find them by category, or I can also type them in right here at the top. So if I want to use Evernote, for instance, any type of integration, just start typing and then find that integration, sign in, install that integration, and this allows Zoom to communicate with other applications, right? This is also where you can find our PayPal integration, for instance, if you'd like to monetize your webinars. Live streaming is what you can do with all your meetings, meetings and webinars. So live stream to Facebook, Workplace by Facebook, YouTube, or a custom live streaming service. And there's just define your custom live streaming service right here. All right. So that much for setting up your webinar. I can now save the entire as a template. And this enables me, so I'm going to give it a name, webinar template. So maybe for my polls, I do have an option to reuse that same webinar, maybe just because I want to save those polls. I can save it as a template. Then next time I want to schedule a similar webinar, I can just come over to webinars, go to my webinar templates, find my webinar template, and then just schedule a new webinar with that template. And all my polls or my settings will already be there for me. Good. All right. So with that, once you're at your webinars right here, your upcoming webinars, as a best practice, sometime before your webinar, maybe one time, maybe multiple times, start your webinar in practice mode. So come here to the portal, start your webinar. If you have the practice mode enabled, this will then start your webinar in practice mode. And now we'll go into the webinar and see how that works. So I'm going to start my webinar. It will start in practice mode, and I'll be notified that I'm in a practice session right now. My attendees cannot join me. My panelists will be. And this is the whole purpose of your practice session. So go through, make sure all your presenters are familiar with the Zoom controls, do a technical check. Once you're ready for your audience to join you, then start that webinar, and then the webinar will be live. If you have activated automatic recording, this is when the automatic recording will kick in. All right, so down here at the bottom, you'll find all your controls, similar as in your Zoom meeting. Zoom, of course, will also ask you at the very beginning, how would you like to join the audio part? Make your selection. Apologies, so just one sec. So make your selection. How would you like to join the audio part? Select your microphone, select your speaker, or cycle through the test where Zoom helps you find working devices on your computer, right? This is to make sure that everything works properly. And then the next tab right here, or the next control, is for the video settings. For the webcams, before you start your webcam, you always have an option to see what others will see. So either choose your virtual background, choose the video filter, or just come to the video settings right here in general. You'll be able to see a preview of yourself, of your webcam. Others will not be able to see you just yet if you have the webcam turned off. So go to the view settings to see a preview and make some individual adjustments. So the touch up my appearance, there's a slider button for that will apply a filter. You can also turn on that adjustment for low light, and also have an option, of course, in your meetings and webinars to use virtual backgrounds and video filters. So with the virtual background right here, select the background you'd like to use. And you can also add your own images to own images and videos to use as virtual backgrounds. Use the plus sign over to the right and then turn on your virtual background. The panelist in a webinar has a different view than your attendee. So panelists in a webinar will have will always see every panelist's video that has their video on. For attendees, we will set what they will see. So right here, panelists, whoever has their webcam on, the panelists will be able to see all of them. And then for my attendees, maybe I set it to gallery view. So they would not only see the speaker, they would see the entire panel in the upper right-hand corner. I can switch from speaker view to gallery view. And here is where you set that for your attendees. Down here under participants, click on participants button and come to more. So this is where I'll make some general settings. The first settings up here, so the upper section, this is for my panelists. I will have to give them permission to use their microphone if I want them to be able to unmute. I will also be able to lock the webinar. After that point in time, nobody else will be able to dial in. And really important, oops, apologies, really important right here. If I want my panelists to be able to turn on their webcam, I will have to give them permission to do so. So also allow your panelists to start the video. The next two sections are for my attendees. This is where I can turn on and off that raise hand feature that we've been using. I can also let my attendees view the participant count. Note and notice from your experience today, you do not see other people's names on the webinar. All you get to see today is me and my shared content. You would not even know if one of your colleagues was in the same webinar as you. But what I can do is I can give you permission to see how many participants are in there. And then down here is where I'm going to set the video layout for attendees. So I want them either to see gallery view or active speaker view, or I can have them follow my view. So follow the view that I'm setting for myself. The participant list now, besides letting you make global settings right here, also lets you manage your panelists and your attendees. So any of the panelists, they will of course see the entire participant list. They'll also see the entire Q&A. They'll see the chat. There's no option for you to turn that off, by the way. Any of my panelists, I can mute them. I can also go to more, stop their video if they have their webcam on, or I can spotlight one of my panelists. And this enforces Vincent's video, for instance, in this case, on everybody's screen. I can also from here, remember we were talking about the co-host earlier? This is where I can make any of my panelists a co-host. And remember, none of my attendees and none of my panelists will need to have a Zoom license. So really any of my panelists, regardless if they have a license or not, I can make them a co-host so they can start the recording, stop the recording, launch the polls for me, help me manage attendees and other panelists. So a lot of great help that they can provide. At any time, I can also change the role of a panelist and move them over to the attendee side. And that works both ways, actually. So for my attendee, I do have this separate tab. I can see all my attendees right here. This is also where I see if they have their hand raised, where I can lower those hands. And I can also come to an individual from my attendee list and individually give them permission to talk. So give them access to their microphone. Under more, I can do things that I know from Zoom meetings already. So I can start a chat, I can rename them or remove them. And here's an important thing that I just mentioned. I can also make Emma a panelist, and with that, give her extended rights on the webinar. So I would also be able to promote an attendee to become a panelist. The chat in my webinar is different from Q&A. So we have one tab for chat, we have the other for the Q&A. So two separate features right here. So chat is pretty much the same as it is in Zoom meetings, with one difference that I can actually use the chat behind the scenes with all my panelists without attendees noticing that. And for that, I'm just going to set how my attendees can chat. So set that to no one, which means I can send out messages. Attendees will not be able to chat back. Or I can also give them permission to chat with all the panelists and attendees. So I can also open the chat for everyone. And then from within the recipients list right here, I get to choose, do I want to send that message to all the panelists and attendees so everybody gets to see that? Or do I want to send this message to just my panelists? And this allows me, even though my attendees are not able to use the chat, I can still use the chat with my panelists to coordinate during the session. So I have that group messaging function either to everyone or even send private chats if I just want to send a message to an individual or send out messages, maybe instructions to all my panelists. Sharing screen, I'm going to cover that really quick because it's exactly the same as in Zoom meetings, and we cover that in Zoom meetings. So right here, give your panelists permission to share their screen if that is what you want. By default, it will just be you as the host. And then, of course, select what it is that you'd like to share, share computer sound, turn on the optimization for video. You have more options, sharing just a portion, sharing computer sound without sharing your screen, contents from a second camera, under files, external files. So I'm just going to share my screen. Once we start the screen share, we have the floating toolbar, and this still allows us to control the screen share. So I can instantly move to a new share without first stopping my share. I can pause my share if I need a private moment. I can use annotations also in webinars. So really the same as in Zoom meetings. We can draw on there, use the stamps. I can turn on the spotlight. This is the red dot that all of you see right now. It's the spotlight. I can also set the format and color of my annotations. I have an option to save my annotated screen even within a webinar. And then, of course, I have the More button, which allows me to access other controls that were in the control bar before. Polling. So polling is available also in Zoom meetings and webinars. Allows you to bring out questions. Let me just quickly right. Let me just quickly launch a poll for you. So I'm just launching the poll. Let me know how you plan on using your webinars, education, brand awareness, customer onboarding, internal all-hand meetings, or other. So make your selection. And while you're answering the poll, all of you are seeing the poll right now. If you're in full screen mode, by the way, then just exit full screen for just a second, because sometimes full screen will cover up the polls. Sometimes the polls get hidden behind it. And if you're watching the recording later on, please note that you will not be able to see those polls showing because we're not sharing Zoom controls. All right, good. So thanks for answering. I'm going to end that poll. Thank you so much. So what I did is I was clicking on polling. The polls I do prepare in the portal, either before my webinar or even on the fly. So I can always just add a question or modify them. That'll take me back to the portal. As I mentioned before, everything around webinars is done on the portal. And then once I have it set up, I can then launch that poll. While participants or attendees are voting right here, I can see incoming responses, and then I can end the poll. So this is what I did so far. And now I have a button to share results. And let me just share the results with you right now of the poll that we just did a minute ago. So majority of you today are using webinars for education purposes. And followed by that is other with 30%. Compare the shared result that I'm just showing to you live. Compare that to the screenshot right here. Do you notice one difference? If you compare that, as the host, so this right here, the screenshot, this is my host view. What you see live today is your attendee view. And you'll notice that as the host, I also get to see individual numbers, individual counts, but my attendees only get to see percentages. All right, so I'm going to stop sharing. Thanks so much for that. And then Q&A, let me just quickly talk about Q&A real quick here. The Q&A is the greatest tool when it comes to interaction with your participants, when it comes to questions they have. You can make a few settings right here. So allow for anonymous questions, You can also allow your attendees to see only answered questions. And this is the setting if privacy is a concern, like today. We're respecting your privacy, so you are not seeing other people's questions. However, if privacy is not that big of a concern, I can also allow for attendees to see all the questions. I can give them permission to upvote. So indicate, yeah, this question is great. I also would like to have this one answered. And I can even have them comment on that. This is what it looks like. Once you open the Q&A, you'll have two tabs: open, answered, and dismissed. You'll see incoming questions. You'll see upvotes right here. So if somebody upvoted, that's going to be the thumb right here. So other attendees out there can click on that thumbs up. And the question with the most upvotes actually moves to the very top. I can see comments that participants may have given to that question. So everything is grouped in. This is why I think it's fantastic. And then I have a few options. So I have the answer live button. If I want to answer a question live, then I can just click on answer live right here. And that will say, you would like to answer this question live. Everybody now gets to see the question. Now, me and my panelists, we also have an option to type answers. So we can also click on type answer right here and then type in the response. And then we have an option to either send the response private, or we can also send the response publicly. If you just needed to dismiss or delete questions, this is also an option. So typically what I do on the public webinars where we do respect your privacy is I will just read your first name. I will read the question. I'm not going to hit any button. I'm just going to answer the question, and afterwards I will dismiss it. And this will make sure that nobody else gets to see your name or your question. Captions. The captions that we have enabled for today, once in your webinar, you'll just be able to either assign somebody to type in closed captions or type the closed captions yourself, or right here, if you use a third-party service, and that was a question, and that was also a question we had earlier. Let's see, too many questions in here by now. Okay. Yeah, I'm not finding that. So that was the question. Can I also use a third-party service? Do we have an integration for that? Yes. So use a third-party service, give them the API token, and that that will enable them then to also use, or that will enable you to use a third-party transcription service. All right, so once closed captions is enabled, your participants would then be able to see anything that you type in or that is being typed in. You can save that closed caption history, type it in down here, and that will show on the screen. The interpretation feature that I previously mentioned, you can start the interpretation right here. So either assign your interpreter, you'll see their channel, you can add another interpreter, and then once you start the feature, this will create these audio channels. So this will open the audio channels, and now your participants, when they click on the interpretation button down there, they will have an option to join these audio channels that you have created. So your translators will have joined their audio channel. They'll be translating, simultaneously translating, and you and your other panelists and your attendees can then all choose which channel they would like to listen to. You can also mute if you're in one of the, let's say I'm in the Chinese channel or in the English channel, I will always hear the original audio from the webinar at a little bit reduced volume. I do have an option though as an attendee to completely turn that off so I can concentrate fully on the translation. All right, now under option, this is where I can start my live stream right here. So if you start the custom live streaming service, make sure that you have this actually defined on the website. And also if you start your recordings, start your recordings and then pause or stop your recordings, and your participants will also be notified in the upper left-hand corner that you are recording the session. To end your webinar, click on end end the webinar. And this is just a control for you as the host. Even your co-host would not be able to end the webinar. It's just you as the host, and then end that webinar. And that's it. All right. So I see, wow, that's a lot of questions coming in. All right. So I'm going to come back to the questions for right now. For those of you that have to leave now, I will move over and see which questions I can still answer, some that have not been answered throughout the sessions. I'll leave the recording on for the moment. I would just like to use or to cover a few slides, actually, a few closing slides. So thank you so much for attending our webinar training today. I do hope it was helpful and informative. We have more trainings for you that you can choose. All these training sessions are entirely free of charge. So please come here, zoom.us live training, or from the portal. There's another way that you can get there. I just want to show that to you. So from the portal, apologies again for the pop-up, right here in the lower left-hand corner, you have a few options. Attend live training, knowledge base. So first of all, let's say attend live training, or go in and select live training from up here. This will bring you over to the available webinars. We also have trainings in German if you'd like to join those. Right here is an option. And also, in addition to the webinar training that you just joined, you also have an option to do a same deep dive for meetings. You can join the Zoom meetings for education, Zoom phone admin, administrative training, Zoom for government if that applies to you. All these training sessions are entirely free of charge. So please let me invite you, come back for more training. Also, what I'd like to share with you is our help center and how do you get there. So from your portal, go to knowledge base right here, or in the upper right hand corner, click on support. And this will bring you to your main resource, your main base for any question that you have around Zoom, your help center. You can type in any kind of question that you have. So if you look for a certain information, maybe you want to learn more about the virtual background, start typing what you're looking for. Zoom will then suggest all those related support articles. And we do have a lot of support articles for you available. And then you can select which one it is that you'd like to review. Also, we have those quick start guides available right here. We have video tutorials that you can watch, or down here, group by support topics. So if you have questions specific for webinar, then you can also come here to meetings and webinars, and then view all those articles that are specific about webinar right here. So we have 26 articles that cover a lot of questions that you may have around webinars. So maybe you do want to see again how to make yourself a template, or you want to see the reports again, then that is an option for you to go to. All right. Now with that, I do want to thank you for participating in the training today. And our customer support, as I showed you, is available also on the Help Center. Down at the very bottom, you'd have an option to contact our support if you cannot find the answers to your questions, or if something really does go wrong. So thanks again for participating in the training today. I'm going to leave the recording on, move over to the questions now here in just a moment. I'm just sharing a few more links with you in the chat. Let's see. Right, so for more trainings, for the support, I'm also going to put in those links right here if you'd like to join more trainings, or if you need to get to the support page from here. And the last link that I'd like to share with you is a personal link. This is a link to a small survey that we're having on SurveyMonkey. It has only 6 questions. On average, takes 1 or 2 minutes to fill it in. I'd appreciate it if you can just let me know. Was the session helpful to you? Is there anything you would like for me to know about trainings? Maybe anything that you want to share with me things that you liked about the training that you feel I should continue to be doing, other things that maybe you want to suggest. I'd appreciate it if you can just give me a little feedback. Your feedback is my chance to improve trainings. So thank you so much for grabbing that last link. All right. So as I promised, I'm now going to move over to the questions and see which ones have not been answered. All right, 80 questions, countdown. We'll see how many I can actually answer. Shantavia says, does Zoom have a live training for companies, say 1 hour overviews? If your company has a customer success manager, depends on the size and on the MRR of your